Thank you all for coming. My name is Lisa Liu. I am a librarian at the Saratoga Library of the Santa Clara County Library District. Um, I'm very happy to present our speaker today, Lily Lee, who has written a book called Fire Scar, The Untold Story of the 1887 Burning of San Jose's Chinatown. Lily is a local author who writes short stories for the World Journal, a food column for Distinctive Taste magazine, and several books in Chinese. Today, she'll be talking about the burning of the San Jose Chinatown, as well as her journey in writing this book. Please welcome Lily.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much to join me this morning. And I'm going to spend 45 minutes talking about the presentation, and then you have about 15 minutes asking questions at the very end. During the pandemic, I wrote a book. I spent about 1 year to write this book, and I will tell you why I'm writing this book and what kind of book it is, and also my finding. So I thought that's kind of interesting because this is my first time writing an English novel, and it is a historical novel. As you know, when you deal with history, you have to look into a lot of things. And this presentation is called The Journey of Writing Fire Scar. Fire Scar is the name of my book. The subtitle is The Untold Story of the 1887 Burning of San Jose's Chinatown. Okay, here's how everything started. I was meeting a friend for lunch in the Fairmont Hotel in San Jose. As you know, that location on the Market Street is a golden location. And then I was very surprised. I saw this plaque. What struck me was the Chinese character. I would say, why the Chinese character, on the wall and in the Fairmont Hotel. And then I walk closely, and it says, in the memory of the burning of San Jose Chinatown, May 4th, 1887. On this side, on May 4th, 1887, a mysterious fire deliberately set. So deliberately, I read this a couple of times, deliberately set, destroy San Jose's Chinatown. This was the largest Chinatown south of San Francisco, a community of bachelors and of families. These early Chinese pioneers were instrumental in developing the economy of Santa Clara County. Dedicated May 4th, 1987, which that means this plaque was put on 100 years later. So I always curious about that. How come, in Silicon Valley, we have so many Chinese people. There isn't a Chinatown here. There's a Japantown, but there's no Chinatown. And then we have to drive an hour north to San Francisco to go to Chinatown. And this is during the pandemic. I went back to the hotel. As you can see, there's nobody on the street. There's almost no car. So it was very easy for me to take the picture. And this plaque is right at the corner. If you go back the hotel now, they don't call it Fairmont anymore because Fairmont apparently bankrupt during the pandemic. Now it's Hilton. So you can always go there to visit this plaque. Okay, so out of curiosity, on the same day I came back, I text a lot of people, I email a lot of people, and I also use multimedia, asking a lot of people on the Facebook, on the WeChat, does anybody know about this plaque? And out of 100 people, only one person, one professor in San Jose State said, oh, he heard about this from an elderly very long time ago. Only one person out of hundreds. So and more, I was so curious about what happened here. So I start digging into the information. So one of the Facebook message I got, and they say you should read about this book. On page 237, of this Driven Out is talking about the San Jose fire. So I bought the book from Amazon, and this book says Driven Out, the Forgotten War Against Chinese American, and then by Jean Fuser. And she is actually working in Washington, D.C. now. And she became a very famous person. And then, so the first page I flip out, because I wasn't sure what this driven out means. And then it's actually have the Chinese character says 排华. So my heart bleeds, instantly. And I start reading the book. I read this book, and then also I start to do more research. I found the Chinese in San Jose and Santa Clara Valley. And also another book called Chinatown, San Jose, USA. Actually, I ordered a lot more book than these, but these are my early researches. And I talk to people tell me that, Lily, you should go to Wushen Gong. And Wushen Gong is a temple of 5 gods. I didn't know anything about Wushen Gong. I don't even know it exists. But it was during pandemic, everything was closed. So it's actually a Chinese American history museum located in a historical park. And later on, still in the pandemic, actually I visited the park. I went with a photographer friend. He said he lived in San Jose for 45 years. He has never seen this place before. He didn't know this whole park exists. Actually, the park is not just Chinese culture. It's all kinds of, a lot of countries' cultures and their museums there. And also I found out CHCP is a project, Chinese Historical and Cultural Project, and they have a website, chcp.org. If you can jot this down and you can visit there, because it's full with information. It helped me a lot with my book. And in this website, I found this Stanford Archaeology Project. The name of the project is, there was a Chinatown here. And then it is a Market Street Chinatown Archaeology Project. That was a time when the Fairmont Hotel was built, and they dig out a lot of artifacts. But where are all these artifacts? They proved that there was a Chinatown there, and Chinese used to live there. Where could I find them? So in my mind, I thought they would be displayed in Stanford and somewhere in the museum exhibit, but also Stanford was closed also. So there's no way I can go. And also in this CHCP, and I found this video. It's by the Oscar-winning documentary filmmaker Jessica Yu. It's called The Home Base, a Chinatown called Helenville. It's about 15 minutes, a video. That also helped me a lot to do the research. So this is the first page, the second page of the Jean Fuser's book. She used to be a graduate student in Humboldt University. And then she realized that there's no Chinese student in the area, and she doesn't know why. So she started to do research, and she in 1 hour, she found out there used to be 40 Chinese roundup in the area, but they are all gone. In the one afternoon, and she found out there were 250 roundups of Chinese American in California alone, 1849 and 1906. So what is a roundup? I'll say it's a little Chinatown. So during the time they were gathering with all the Chinese. So my heart really bleeds, and more things I read across the country, all the way to the east, like Philadelphia is one of them. They really, abuse and destroy Chinese home. I say, okay, I live in 10 miles from San Jose. I don't have the time, and the energy to do the whole entire American history. I'm just going to do the local. I'm a local writer. I'm just going to do a local report of what my finding is. So during my finding, and I read a lot of documents, and then I put a lot of the true story, true historical event into my book. And this Tacoma Driven Out is one of them. One of the characters, his true name is called Tak Nan. Eventually, I make him become community leader in San Jose. So there was a big story about him and his family, and mostly they are truths from the history. So what happened was in the winter days, in November 3rd, 1885, it's cold and raining. The mayor let 20 white person forcefully expel 900 Chinese. At 9 a.m., they would ask all Chinese to leave by 1:30 p.m. They would break into their locked house, smash doors and windows. The people refused to go, and some of the white person will drag them out of the house. Some women unable to walk on their tiny bonded feet were tossed in the wagon. So they're with arms and pistol, some with clubs. 2 days later, Tacoma's Chinatown was destroyed by fire. No Chinese has been allowed to reside in Tacoma since that day. So by the Lake Junction, there was a stop on Northern Pacific Railroad. That was the railroad built by Chinese labor. So they had to walk in the freezing winter day, 140 miles to Portland. And guess what happened when they go to Portland? At the same year, in the winter days, the raids and arson in Chinatown reached to Portland. And the Chinese refugee from the Tacoma had to flee again. So they also burned the Portland's Chinatown. And this picture is the anti-Chinese riot in Seattle, Washington. Okay, this is a very famous picture. Why it's famous? Because it's the biggest massacre of Chinese. So on September 2nd, 1885, the worst massacre of the immigrant Chinese miners by white immigrant miners was a result of racial prejudice toward Chinese miners who were perceived to be taking jobs from the white miners. The goal is to kill Chinese labor, not to let them leave. They rob and kill every Chinese man they see. They murder and burn their homes to the ground. They threw Chinese body into the flames of burning buildings. The sick or could not run or burned alive in their camp houses. Some will burn lower limbs into a crisp and leaving the upper trunk untouched, while they try to dig a hole in the cellar to hide. Even women, I'm talking about white women, were into the massacre. They had gathered at the bridge where they stood and cheered on the rampage. Some women repeatedly fired shots at the Chinese who were scared and running, just like moving ducks in a carnival that you go. So to be killed and robbed as well as burn their houses were not end of this. Besides, those were burned alive. Chinese miners were scalped, mutilated, branded, decapitated, dismembered, and hanged from the gutter sprouts. The scream from the hell goes into the night. One of the Chinese miners, peanuts and testicle, were cut off and tossed as a trophy of the hunt. So they are really treated worse than animal. So this is the event amount to the racial terrorism. The attack at Rock Spring were extraordinarily violent, revealing a long-held hatred of the victims. The sheer brutality of the violence toward the hardworking Chinese miner goes into the history of early Chinese American. So if you go to the Wikipedia, there was a location and exactly what happened and what time and how many people. So a lot of information I found, it was really the hot-blooded reporter who wrote them, because a lot of history, I don't know why, it was difficult to find. Okay, we have a professor from Colorado here, so he must know the history of on the Halloween in 1880. There was anti-Chinese sentiment in Colorado, in Denver. In And that's one of the worst, Colorado's worst episode of the racial violence. The mob beat one of the Chinese men to death and injured dozens of them and destroyed Chinese home and businesses. Okay, so why am I telling all this story? Because all this history become part of my book. And they are the characters in my book. So as the Chinese sail from the humble bay, they will shake the humble dust from the sandals, satisfy the county is a fine place, but no place for Chinamen. This is also why Jean Fisher wrote the book, Driven Out, since she went to school there and there was no Chinese student in the 70s. No Chinese student in a humble due to the Eureka Driven Out. So one local poet say, Chinese American won't send their kids here. 100 years ago, they were driven out. So let's go burn the devils out. Okay. So at that time, if they don't want them, they deport them. And a lot of time, I realized they just deport them to San Francisco. So now, I saw in a lot of books that San Francisco itself doesn't really offer much work because there's no miner or full picker or gold miners there and no railroad. So they were all expelled, driven out to San Francisco. That's why we have the biggest Chinatown there. Okay. This is the probably the earliest date that Chinese come to America, 1848. This is Chinese gold miners in Tuolumne. You know, that's where the Yosemite is. So within 2 years, with 2 years of discovery of gold in January 24 of 1848, at the sawmill on the American River in California, more than 150,000 men from the eastern US and across the globe poured into San Francisco. And one of the characters is from this, in my book, is from this part also, because later on I'm going to tell about the fire. And there was, you know, how Chinese, some of them like to gamble. So the owner of the casino, it used to be a gold miner. Okay, everyone knows about that Chinese built the railroad. Okay, so when they were building the railroad, if you can see the lower right corner of the picture, Chinese will pay less than American worker and live in tents, while white workers were given accommodation in the train car. So that is the picture of, you know, because you're building a railroad, you have to move along every day. And Chinese get to stay in the tent. So to get to the High Sierra, Chinese worker cut through the dense forest, through deep ravines, long trestle, and build enormous retaining walls, some of which remain intact today. All work was done by hand using carts, shovels, and picks, but no machinery. They blast out 15 tunnels, the longest near 1,700 feet. So that was during 1865. There was about 20,000 in total over time. So, they toiled through the back-breaking labor during both the frigid winter and blazing summer. Hundreds died from explosion, landslide, accident, disease, and even though they made major contribution to the construction for the transcontinental railroad. And of course, Chinese immigrants being largely ignored by the history, and they were paid 30 to 50% lower than the white workers. And white workers are not happy because they think they took their job. And then Chinese also take the most difficult and dangerous work, including tunneling and using explosive. There's also evidence they face physically abuse at the time from some supervisor. They protest, and then the long hours they use the collective strength to challenge the company. So this is the in the part of my story. I made a twin brothers, and the supervisor does not like the older brother's guts, so giving a short fuse to have him to explode. So there was explosion, and then the younger brother tried to rescue him. Or there's a on and on. You should read the book. Oh, okay. So this is during the Sierra. They were in the mountains. So they were made up most of the workforce between roughly 700 miles of train track between Sacramento and also Utah. And then during that time, 2.5 million Chinese citizens left their country and to work for US. And then also their works are very tiresome because everything is by hand. As the railroad was built entirely by manual labor and used a shovel, 20 pounds of rocks over 400 times a day. They have faced dangerous work conditions, accidental explosions, snow and rock avalanches, which kill hundreds of workers, not to mention frigid winter. You gotta understand, most of the Chinese workers, they came from Canton. Canton people has never seen snow in their entire life. And then when they work in the Sierra Mountains, in one of the avalanche in the winter time, there were 2,000 workers buried under the snow. The body did not recover until the springtime when the snow melted. Okay, this is also a very famous landmark. That's a 10-mile of the track laid in one day. This is in April 28th, 1868. So this record has never been broke. They are just like an army marching over the ground and leaving the tracks behind in one day, 24 hours. And actually, this is a famous place to hike right now. A lot of people in hike are going and couldn't come back because when you come back, it's 20 miles. So this is the phenomenal 10-mile of track. In this picture, I'm sure a lot of people have seen this picture. This is the day that it's an iconic photograph taken by a photography on May 10th, 1869. So this is where the Central Pacific, Union Pacific Railroad, the line meet and they shake hands. Guess what? There was no Chinese in the photo. Building a railway is a hard and miserable job. It's usually done by poor immigrant workers. A railway is too difficult to build. It's hundreds of miles, go through mountains and jungles. It's extreme barbarity and cruelty. And the condition is such that those who did not die may well wish they had. To build such a railway, you need more than just poor immigrants. You need slaves. So none of these slaves got any credit in this picture. Okay, this was the living condition for Chinese immigrant working in the US during that time. On the left side, you can see that they got 3-level bunk bed, and 2 people share a twin size bunk bed. And their entertainment is the rats, the mouse, and they're all male. They're all male. And then on the right side is white workers' family. So this a white child is all a Chinese child at that time, and this still happened. And now they attack the elderlies, and this is more than 100 years later. Assault still happens. And this is how much they welcome the Chinese immigration, and this was on the newspaper. And this is the toy they play. They inscribe the Chinese must go. This is in 1884. Okay, what about women? So when there's a Chinese women come to United States, what happened to them? So if you're a woman, you mostly get kidnapped, work as sex slaves or prostitute in US. If you escape from their locked crib and brothel, only to be forced return to their owner after the purge. And without medical care, most prostitutes become ill after a short time. In many towns, if a Chinese prostitute was hopelessly diseased, she was cast into the street or locked in the room with 1 cup of water and a bowl of rice to die alone. Mostly die very young. They mostly die in their 20s. Hardly anybody reach to their 30s. Okay, you better don't make any mistake. If you in a jail, you mostly will not get out because you will be abused, you get hanged, you got shot in the head, you get fearfully mutilated. I mean, you've been treated worse than animal, that's for sure. So this is what happened in the Los Angeles jail. Uh-oh, I can, okay, all right. Okay, these statements are made by the Council of the Chinese in the opening argument before the joint committee of the 2 houses of Congress in Chinese immigrant. They have seen a storm and this Chinese immigrant at the moment they are out of ship, and some of them pass out, and some of them their scalps and cut open, you know, on their wagon. And then I have seen them storm when going afoot from the steamship. No arrests were made and no police interfere. So you think you come to United States as a worker, you are welcome? No. The moment you're off the ship, you get stormed. Okay, this is a Chinese Exclusion Act. If you see the 4th line, it says ban Chinese women from immigrating to United States. So what happens when you ban women? When you ban women, that means you make ethnic cleansing. Why is it ethnic cleansing? If you ban women, you ban children, heritage, lineage, future generation. So this Chinese Exclusion Act is nothing but ethnic cleansing. And that is why Chinatown is a bachelor town. Okay, this is one of the ad. They only hire first-class white labor because they claim they are neatness and cleanness and characterize their work. So all of this information are part of my story which I collect. And okay, on the left side, this picture is Reverend Thomas Jung. He is a very courageous pastor in San Jose Church because he helped and support Chinese, and he teach them English, teach them Bible story, offer them Sunday school and worship. And guess what? They destroy his church. So on the right side, that is Troy. That's the church got destroyed by fire. And this is a part of my story too. So on the right-hand corner, that's the picture I took on over in the cultural park. So there was a firehouse. Actually, there was a firehouse. There was a train, a group of people that were, because the fire is going on all the time. So there were a group of people, they were trained to rescue fires, and also that there was a water tank. So at the Market Street in Chinatown at that time, the lower picture is all by wood at the time. So back in 1883, the Chinatown has already organized its own volunteer fire department. However, someone has drained the Chinese water tank on the day the fire happened. This is the historical picture of San Jose Chinatown fire. And with the San Jose Chinatown on May 4th, 1887, it destroyed the entire settlement in San Jose Chinatown. And then there were no notice at 3 o'clock. When I say there's no notice, as you know, in Tacoma, they give you 2 hours or 3 hours to pack and then kick you out and then burn your house. In this case, no, there was no notice. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon on the May 4th, 1887, most of the Chinese had gone to the gambling house to hear the announcement of the lottery winner. The arson was set in 4 to 5 different corners in Chinatown. Just like I mentioned before, as earlier as 1883, Chinatown organized its own volunteer fire department. However, someone had drained the Chinese water tank. It was not by chance that during the 2 weeks preceding the blaze, prominent white property owner in the Chinatown had added heavily to their fire insurance. So white businessmen, they all have fire insurance 2 weeks before the fire. Okay, let me introduce two characters here. On the left hand side is the John Helen. John Helen is a German immigrant to America. He's a businessman, a friend of Chinese. He offered Chinese jobs and also offered them very cheap house to live. But of course, he's hated by the mayor and the government council and the businessman. On the right side is the mayor during that time, during the fire. So after the San Jose Chinatown destroyed, he became a Garden City National Bank president. Okay, so gathering all these stories, I have enough history story to write a book, and I built about 20 characters. So I have written 3 Chinese books. So I start writing the book in Chinese again. And then my daughter say, are you writing another book that I couldn't read because she was born here? So I say this book is all about Chinese immigrant. So Chinese immigrants should read this and they read Chinese. And then she says, no, I don't think so. I think there should be education. If you guys didn't know about the story, then you should tell the generation, your generation after generation. So there should be more ABC and more ABC should read about this book. So therefore, this book should be in English. And at the time, I wasn't sure she was right or not. And then I started writing bilingual. I wrote bilingual for 2 weeks. It drives me crazy because basically 2 language structure are different. I can't go on. I have to pick one. So I figured this will be my long project during the pandemic. I will try to write an English historical novel. So I also thought about historical fiction or documentary. I think that Jim Fisher's book is very good. I don't need to recreate another documentary. There's plenty out there, you know, for people to read. For writing a documentary, I think she probably spent 10 or 20 years to write that book. And I want this book to be easy and simple to read and throughout the general audience, people can understand quickly. So the age group and readers, I wanted to be simple English. So 5th grade can read it and 80 years old can read it, or 90 years old. So spread out all ages. And everything happened locally. It started out during pandemic 2020, you know, discovery, just like I said, discover the plight, and to go back to the 1887, and then how they relate to each other. And then, like I said, character and roles, I have about 20 character and roles. They all relate to part of the history I just told you. as writing a Chinese book, I didn't need an editor before. I just need a proofreader. And then, but with the first time I'm writing an English novel, I need to hire an editor and proofreader, beta readers. I have a couple of beta readers right here today. They are my biker friends from Western World. And then each week we talk about this. Sometimes I get very frustrated. You know, they comfort me, they encourage me. So eventually they were my first beta readers. And I didn't know I need a formatter. Formatter, I need to have the margin, the bleed, the whole 9 yards, that's something I learned. So eventually everything's the right size. I get to self-publish in Amazon. That was quite an experience. So the thing with the book, you got to have a name. So how should I name this book? I even have invite people to write Chinese character for me for the cover page. And the first name is very straightforward, Burning of Chinatown. People say you don't want to do this because you basically told the story already. And then I name it as Rising of the Ashes. Actually, that's a very, very scary name. After I named that, I got nightmares. I feel all the spirits from the San Jose Chinatown all came to me and say, Lily, you got to help me and tell the story. So I got really, really worried. And eventually I named this Fire Scar. Fire Scar has two meanings. If you see this little girl looking at the fire, on the right side of her neck, it's got a torch, tiny little red dot. That's actually a torch. Her mark on the neck is a real fire scar. But the story started, like I said, in 2020, and the girl who discovered the plaque, she has a birthmark. She has a birthmark. It's also red. It's a torch. It's a shape as a torch. So I made her investigate the story, went to Wusengong, and saw this little girl's picture, got exactly the same exactly the same mark on the neck. So she asked the docent, she said, is there something wrong with my eyes? Take a look at this little girl's picture. How come she's got the same exactly shape mark on her neck? So this connect these two together. Eventually the story, her discovered this girl from 1887 is her relatives. So you need to read the story and tell what kind of relationship they had. And also another meaning of fire scar, of course, is the Chinatown. It's a scar in our heart forever. So I have to look for somebody to design the cover. I had the idea, but I need an artist to draw everything. And she did a wonderful job. And there's a dragon and also lantern that shows that it's a Chinatown. And I also have to invite somebody to write a blog in the back of my book. And people say, oh, you should go find the mayor, some big shots and president. I figure it used to be San Jose mayor burned the Chinatown. I wouldn't want to have a mayor to write my blog. So what I found was the co-founder of the Chinese Historical and Cultural Project of Santa Clara Valley, Jerry Wang, and she wrote my first part. And the second part is OCAW national president, Christina Chen. They all did a wonderful job to write in the back of my book. So this is the Wusengong. On the left side, that's the original Wusengong. It was during the fire, they actually rescued these five gods, and also they collect $2,000 to construct this brick structure. But when cultural park was built, they were building exactly same temple in the park. So that's on the right-hand side. So in 1987, 850,000 was raised. So that was the real Wusengong on the right-hand side. That's a picture I took during the pandemic. At that time, I haven't gotten into Wusengong. I don't know all the story I created inside Wusengong is although in my imaginations. So, okay. And also at that time, Chinese are not allowed to bury with white people. And then I went to a Chinese cemetery in San Jose twice because the first time I went to the wrong area. I went to uphill. I said, wow, this is nice. A lot of rich Chinese buried here. There are pagoda and dragons. And then the president of the cemetery told me that, oh, no, you went to the wrong place. It's next to each other, but it's a different gate. So I had to make an appointment with him. I went there, and that's all it has left. And you can see a lot of tombstone there because at the time they tried to clean this place. And then he said he was 5 minutes late. He made this place all flat. All the tombstone were broken. So he collects some and put it together. And then he also gave me a map of who's buried there. Hundreds of bodies still underneath buried there. And on the map, it has everyone's name. Everybody start with AH. I say, how come everybody start with AH dash or something? He said, during that time, you know, those the Chinese workers, they don't speak English, and then they couldn't translate their name. So it's all Ah Xiong, Ah Mei, Ah whatever. Everybody start with AH. So that's a tombstone. So eventually, the Wusen Gong has a soft opening. I finally got in there. It's a beautiful place. You should definitely go. On the right-hand side, everything was a chronological order. If I have seen this picture, it saved me a lot of research work. Here is the artifact of the Stanford Archaeology Project. It's in Wusen Gong. Oh, I was in tears because I didn't know where to go. I mean, still in Stanford the museum is not open. So it's not in Stanford, it's right here. There was a Chinatown here. These are all the artifacts. And the downstairs and upstairs Wusen Gong is very clean and beautiful, colorful. And these are the 5 gods. These are the 5 gods. Guangong, Guanyin, and Chen Huang, and also Tyson, that's the god of the wealth, and also Tian Ho, the queen of the heaven. Okay, so you say, what about this book? Is it a good book to read? Should I spend my money and energy to read this? Okay, this is a very famous Chinese writer and poet. I don't know her. She just told me one day, she said, Lily, I'm going to order one of your book, and then I'm going to write a review about it. So a week later, she gave me a prize. And she say in the Amazon, you can still see today, a big applause to the author Lily, who brought the untold story of burning of the San Jose Chinatown to life in most skillful storytelling. The smoke followed the main character Todd a long way from Tacoma fire to San Jose, seemed to have followed every Chinese immigrant and the Asian since then. The smoke of racial hatred, smoke of violence, they successfully keeping the readers spellbound with the storytelling skill and plot geared toward to the climax, and each character's inner development in time of suppressive and hatred, a true page turner indeed. So in this day, there are less people reading and more people watching a movie. So I really, really want this book to become a movie because we have so many American Indians movie killed by the, cowboy and soldiers. And we have a lot of Jews and Nazi movie about Holocaust. I must watch over 10 of them. And there's a lot of award-winning Black slave movie. How come there's no Chinese American about Chinatown burning stories? It was burning everywhere. It's not just in San Jose. So where is this all going? Currently, it's a coincidence that when I finished the book, in all this Asian crime, Asian hates, and calling us China flu and Chinese virus and discrimination, it's all coming out. So what about our next generation? I think in times it was on the newspaper. It say, the next 10 years is really going to be difficult for Chinese. So here is a history park. I encourage you to visit. It's rich, really rich with the history. And here's the address. And this is a part of the park. It's really beautiful. It's near the Kelly Park in San Jose. I know I'm over time for 5 minutes. So, and this book was released on May 22nd, and both in paperback and Kindle. And it's very easy to order from Amazon. So right now I'm opening for a question and answer.
Thank you so much, Lily. If you could unshare your screen so that we could see you, your video screen, that would be great. And if anybody has questions, please enter them in the chat box. If you prefer to ask your question, you could go ahead and unmute yourself and ask Lily directly. Otherwise, I'll read questions from the chat box.
Actually, if you don't have any question, you have any comments about how do we handle the Asian crimes, Asian hate, Emma, you are welcome to speak now.
Oh, there's a question from Leanne. She wants to know what was the most rewarding part of writing this book.
Personally, of course, I was complete English novel. I have never done English book before, and I have never done a novel before. So this is the first time, and I self-publish. This is an accomplishment for myself. And of course, overall, I talk about the San Jose fire, and it seems like nobody know about the story. Very little people know about the story. So another rewarding part is I bring this story out. People actually know about it, and they will actually go there to visit and look at the plaque and read my story and knowing what happened, you know, how these people live. And also it's just happened that when I finished the book, all this Asian crime and hatred came out. We need to rethink about how are we going to handle this. Things happened over 100 years ago, still happening now. Why is that? How do we stop that? How is our future generation going to live in this country? And I think we are really a model immigrants. We contribute a lot. Over 100 years ago, we built a railroad. Right now, I live in Silicon Valley. We contribute a lot about high tech. So, and I do think Chinese people are really disciplined and we are good citizens. So I think the most rewarding part for myself is to write this book and to the public knowing about the story.
There's a comment from Connie Young-Yu. She mentions that there is a 2016 video called Digging to Chinatown about the Market Street in Hainnanville, Chinatown, that was produced by Connie and Bar Fong. It's available free on Vimeo. So I guess you can just Google Digging to Chinatown and get the access to the video. I will also try to include links to a lot of these resources that are being mentioned in the email that I send out with the recording link.
So is that video available on the CHCP website? Oh, Connie, is Connie there?
Yeah, if anybody who's associated with CHCP knows, feel free to chime in.
There's a Max raising his hand a couple times.
Okay,
Max, how are you?
Great. Thank you for your presentation. I had never heard about this, just like the Tulsa race massacre was something I learned. So I think there's really a failing in our education system. I grew up here, in California. I grew up in Santa Cruz, and I, learned nothing about this. So I really appreciate that you are, bringing this forward. And yeah, if we can get this into the school system, I think that would be a great start, that so students are learning about this.
Yes, Cynthia Chen is the in the Saratoga School district. She had mentioned offer this to the teacher and also the library. The thing is, when I was researching about John Helen, was very little information about him. I don't know if this done was purposely or like I said, a lot of things I dig out was from the newspaper, was a hot blood reporter writing things about it. And also, if you look at Chinatown in San Jose, on the top, it really says, in the Wikipedia, it says this website needs to be reconstructed. I don't know who constructed Wikipedia. Apparently, it's very, very poor, lack of a lot of information, you know. So it's not surprised that people don't know, because there wasn't a lot of record, you know, for people to look for. And even for me, for over a year, there was still a lot of unanswered questions. Thank you, Max.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're getting quite a few comments in the chat box. Somebody asked whether there were any casualties to the 1887 fire, or any deaths or injuries.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think there was around 1,000 people lived there, and there were people couldn't escape from the fire because it happened too sudden, and also water tank has been drained, so everything was burned down to the ground. And what John Helen did was a rebuild. 8 days later, he rebuilt Chinatown and was used brick, okay, to build the Chinatown. And they have 24 hours of guard around Chinatown to make sure nobody burn the Chinatown. Of course, after John Helen died, and then his son is a lawyer, he fights for the Chinese too. But after that, you know, nobody take care of Chinatown anymore. And the real Helenville is actually Japantown right now. So down in South, there's no Chinatown here. The closest one is in San Francisco. Yeah.
Yeah, they rebuilt near 5th and Taylor in San Jose, I believe. Connie, do you know if there was any more history about John Heinlein? Okay, I don't know if Connie's still on.
Can you hear me? Yes.
Yeah. Hi, Connie.
Hi. I just wanted to say that if you read the book Chinatown, San Jose, USA, I give the whole history of the Heinlein family, and also the story of the Market Street fire from the newspaper accounts of 1887. And the casualties were probably a lot of wounded Chinese who were running into the fire trying to save their goods. They were singed by the fire, and the spectators were standing around laughing when they went to retrieve their goods. This is from a reporter's account, and there weren't any deaths reported. And so people did escape from the fire. Many of them, you know, fled and went to San Francisco's Chinatown, and they waited until they could come back. I guess it would be over a year later. My grandfather to San Francisco and to find work, and he did come back to Hollywoodville much later when he could be a merchant in a store. So, you know, the casualties were immense and they're untold, but we don't have any reports of fatalities.
Okay, thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Connie.
So Gil asks Lily if you have seen the program Warrior on Cinemax about the San Francisco Chinatown, based on some notes that Bruce Lee had written about, which is kind of like a revised history with a lot of kung fu in it. Are you familiar with that series?
Well, it was a Chinese name.
Well, I think it's mostly in English. It's called Warrior.
Oh, I'm not sure. I watch a lot of movie, a lot of kung fu movie. I'm not sure if I watch it exact this one. I will look into it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's on HBO Max too. Thanks to Sarah for that info.
Okay. That was the next thing I would do. I do have HBO.
Yeah, it's a series. It's a TV series.
Okay. Okay.
All right. Well, it's already 11 o'clock. Thank you all for coming. I appreciate your time. And Lily, thank you very much for bringing this untold history, or this little known history, to the public.
Well, thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you all. Have a great weekend.
Oh, you too. Bye-bye.
Bye.